these narratives circulate, we have to get in front of them, especially now. And getting in front of them means having a strategy. It means being in community, because that's the only way we're going to be able to build the people power. As people, we have created narratives, but also as people, we can change the narrative too. My name is Cierra Kaler-Jones, and I am the Executive Director of Rethinking Schools, the nation's leading grassroots publisher for racial and social justice in education. I'm from Virginia, but Rethinking Schools is actually based in Milwaukee, and I'm so excited to be here for the Data for Public Good conference to talk to folks about narrative power building. At the Data for Public Good conference, I'm speaking about narrative power building. How do we shift and shape some of the harmful narratives around AI and technology? And how do we build something more beautiful, more loving, more liberatory? And a lot of that is really centered in community. How do we make sure that community has the tools to be able to strategize around narratives so that we can do a both and strategy of dismantle the harmful narratives and also to build? This topic is important to me because I get so jazzed about all things storytelling and narrative power building, because I've personally experienced the power in sharing my own story to advocate for change at a school board meeting when I was a high school student. And so ever since then, we won our campaign. And ever since then, I realized that storytelling could move people. And then I started to learn more about how stories build to narratives, and those narratives shape our beliefs and values, which ultimately impacts our actions and whether or not we uphold or dismantle the status quo. I want the attendees and viewers of the Data for Public Good conference to know that we have power. A lot of the most prevalent narratives in AI and technology right now are evoking feelings of fear, because fear is actually one of the easiest stories to sell and believe. And so I want people to know that we are not powerless, as the opposition might try to make us believe with these fear-mongering narratives, but we actually can create narratives that are affirmative and provide affirmative visions for people. Let people know what you want them to do. Let people know where we're going. Let people know the vision, and start with the vision first, and let's leave the fear narratives behind. In this moment in time, it is so critical that we engage in narrative power building, because we have seen the anti-critical race theory legislation. We've seen the anti-LGBTQ plus legislation. We've seen the anti-organizing legislation, all amid climate crisis and upcoming presidential election. And so as these narratives circulate, we have to get in front of them, especially now. And getting in front of them means having a strategy. It means collaborating. It means being in community, because that's the only way we're going to be able to build the people power. Because with narrative power building, in order to build a narrative, we need people to do it. And as people, we have created narratives, but also as people, we can change the narrative too. One action that I would encourage people to take is to learn about AI, to learn about technology, to demystify some of these narratives that are circulating it. I think one of the challenges of the moment is that because it seems so scary, and oftentimes it can be perceived as dangerous, it can make people feel as though we don't have the power to change it. So the first step is to learn, to engage, and then to be not only a part of the conversation, but for us to get in front of the conversation. I draw inspiration from my students. So I come to education work by way of being a teaching artist. I've taught babies as young as 2 up through adults. And in every conversation that I have with them, I see how they are making critical connections, how they are talking about dismantling structures and systems, how they are also talking about what could be possible. recently when I was talking to students about AI and technology, but also about Afrofuturism, I encourage them to draw what does your Afrofuturistic world look like. And so one of my students, Naima, created this beautiful animation of a home that was powered by water, or powered by a waterfall. And what she said to me was, Miss Cierra, I wanted to make connections between climate change and how we could use technology to solve some of these pressing issues. And even students that say, we can actually use AI for better, for good. What if we actually flip the script and had it so that AI would call out teachers if they were to say something racist, or call out something problematic, call out oppression? What if we actually created these counter technologies that centered our voices, our experiences? And that's how I know that the future will be better. Oh my gosh. My vision for a better future, I think, encompasses in so many things. I think it's the dismantling, like abolishing the prison industrial complex, abolishing policing and all of the ways and forms that it shows up, abolishing all of the ways that oppression shows up on a daily basis in every single part of society, from healthcare to law to just every single possible place. But it's also about building something that is joyful. And so if you were to ask me, I think I would think about dance and having a dance break in the middle of the day. I would think about community centers. I would think about more green spaces, more garden spaces, community gardening. I would think about education systems in schools where students could engage in creativity and criticality, to dialogue about some of the world's most pressing issues and come up with solutions together. So I think that the vision is so broad, and I would probably need many, many days to talk about all of the different pieces of what it could look like. So when I was a junior in high school, that's the first time that I ever shared my story. Believe it or not, I was very shy, so shy that I hated raising my hand in class. But during my junior year of high school, the Board of Education decided that it was going to cut all of the arts programs because of statewide budget cuts. So we immediately started organizing. I started gathering peers, teachers, community members. We were writing op-eds to the local newspaper. We started a social media campaign, and we were showing up at the Board of Education meeting. And so if I were to share a tip with folks, I would say share your personal story. That's what I did at the Board of Education meeting. And I wanted them to feel the story. I was giving them stats and facts about arts education and all of the ways that it is so crucial to democracy, to engaging in this society and being creative. But what I really honed in was on the feelings and the emotions of what the arts did for me. And we were actually successful in that campaign. We won with a unanimous vote from the Board of Education. And so I try to center that story in a lot of the work that I do, because I have to model for other people. If I'm asking them to share their stories, I need to do that as well. So that's one tip that I have, is really hone in on some of those emotions and storytelling. We talk a lot about imagery and how to make people feel as though they're there with you, because the body engages in a physiological exchange movement when we feel a story. And that's ultimately what compels people to take action, is when they feel. Yes. I am a dancer. I've been dancing for over 25 years now, but I'm also a dance teacher. So a lot of the storytelling work that I do is not only in verbal expression and written expression, but also thinking about how do we reclaim our bodies and reclaim our movement. I think particularly in an education system where our bodies are policed often, especially for Black and Brown young people. How do we break out of that by knowing ourselves intuitively and being able to better understand our body? So that's something that I like to bring into every space that I enter. At our breakout workshop, one of the areas of narrative power building that we dove into was all about audience, message, value. Audience and knowing your audience is one of the most strategic ways to create narrative change. And my students roll their eyes when I say this, but you need to know your audience so well that you know what they eat for breakfast. And that's where the strategy lies, is knowing, are they a part of your base of supporters? Are they in the middle? Are they somebody that is not ever going to be a part of your narrative or not ever going to be a part of your organizing? And so when you know your audience, you then know what messages you need to tailor. And the messages need to be tailored to the audience in order for them to actually understand it. And then there's values. Values are crucial to understanding about your audience because you want to hold them accountable to their values. If they say they value safety, well, if we're actually talking about public safety and community safety, police don't keep us safe. If we're actually talking about love and justice and democracy, well, let's talk about how we've never really ever lived in a democracy outside of Reconstruction, which is the closest thing, and they burned that all down, right? So thinking about some of these values to be able to have those conversations with the audience, because as you build and build and build and engage in dialogue is where you make that change. Right now we are living in a moment where almost every state has either introduced or passed legislation that is banning critical conversations about racism and oppression in school. One of the harmful narratives that is really circulated is that the opposition has tried to brand critical race theory, which is an important scholarly legal theory, brand it as something that is negative. And so on our side, we are working to flip that narrative. And part of what the opposition is doing is they're using fear tactics to make people afraid of learning about the history, of grappling with things that are hard so that we can be able to dream new futures. So in thinking about flipping that, one of the things that a lot of narrative strategists are talking about is actually love, because we love people, we love a world that doesn't exist yet, and we want it to be better. But in order to do that, we have to learn the history, we have to be aware of it, because that's the only way that we're going to make change. And so that's a narrative strategy that is still in process, but I think it's one that we have to lean into because it is so connected to AI, it's so connected to technology, especially because so much of that is affecting and impacting Black and brown students. And in schools, they wouldn't even be able to teach about it or to learn about it, as we've seen many educators being terminated or being doxxed for teaching the truth about the systems that impact them and impact their students the most. I think one of the ways to continue on is to find community and to find connection. One thing that I talk to folks about often is that in this capitalist society that we live in, it's actually not structured for us to seize places of joy and of freedom and of collaboration and creativity and of rest. And so we have to rest. We have to be well because the opposition doesn't want us to be well. That's part of the system. And so when we are in moments where there's lots of struggle, we just have to be reminded that there are other people that are in the work with us. I think sometimes what makes it feel so daunting is that we might feel isolated or siloed, and we feel like we have to carry the weight of the world on our shoulders. But it's all about community and knowing that there are other people in your community that can pick up where you need to leave off, and you take breaks and you rest. And we have to seize that rest for ourselves in order to be well and in order to continue on. One of the major challenges that we're fighting right now with tech and AI is just all of the ways that it's been co-opted and weaponized against Black and brown students in particular. As I talk about schools, we see tech like coming up as a way to replace teachers, as a way to replace school counselors, as a way to replace human interactions. We also see facial recognition technology that we know includes a lot of bias. And so further criminalizing and further punishing Black and brown students, LGBTQ plus students. So we have to keep fighting some of the ways that AI is just another way that oppression morphs in different structures and systems, in the ways that it continues to get perpetuated through these technologies. When it comes to storytelling, we have to engage in a both and strategy. The both and being we have to fight to have our stories on the front page of corporate media, but we also have to forge our own fugitive spaces where we can tell our stories in our own way. At Rethinking Schools, one of the main pieces of our work is supporting educators, students, parents, activists, and organizers, and actually writing down their own stories and putting them in print so that we can pass them down, especially at a time when stories are being erased. So we have to continue to engage in that work. We have to put our stories down, and we have to pass them on. I always tell people that the most important person that you'll ever tell your story to is yourself. And stories are something that help us make sense of our lived experience, but also the world around us. So when you tell your story, feel confident and feel comfortable to just put it down on paper. Even if you just sit on it, even if you hold it, something about putting it on paper gives it permanence, and know that your story is part of this collective sort of weaving of a larger tapestry of how we understand the world. And so nobody else in the world has your story. That's what jazzes me so much about storytelling. Nobody else has your story, and the world needs to hear it.